welcome to the Heather Penny Podcast, where our goal is to help you reach your potential by increasing clarity, building confidence, and engaging courage. Dr. Heather Penny is a leadership coach, trusted advisor, and admired author. I'm Christina Morales, a writer and marketer, and Heather is my dear friend and my coach. Today, we're continuing with our theme for March, Your Powerful Life. And today, we're going to talk about the shadow side of our strengths. Now, this may sound counterintuitive to our theme, but just like Superman knows that kryptonite compromises his strengths, I determined that knowing our weaknesses can help us preserve our strengths. So, Heather, this is a topic that really intrigued me. And, not a lot of people are talking about it. And I'm so glad that you brought this up. It kind of makes me think about when a famous person such as like Robin Williams or Anthony Bourdain dies, we realize the yin and yang of their successes and battles. Like Robin Williams, he was so brilliant and he felt such high highs, but the shadow side is he felt low lows. And Anthony Bourdain was so brilliant that he got inside of his head and he just couldn't get out of it. Mm-hmm. So what are some common strengths that you see on day-to-day people or with your clients? What are the shadow sides that we neglect, but we need to pay attention to?
Well, man, I'm so glad you brought that up. My mind's already clicking and thinking about Robin Williams because I just saw a documentary on him and it was so good. And I remember thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think they did such an honoring job in the documentary of saying his amazing, brilliant brain started working against him, literally in a physiological manner and probably an emotional manner. But I think my research, I was so intrigued with this idea that my research really studied human intelligence. I was curious about this high intelligence in humanity. As an educator, I'd seen this, and then as a parent, and then now as a coach working with really high level of individuals, I started seeing the shadow side of high IQ, high EQ, even high SQ. And it's this idea that with the high intelligence, you have a very fast ability to process and have a lot of ideas, but the shadow side of it is you can get overwhelmed with it.
Yeah.
Or you can get fatigued by your own thought process. And if you're not aware of that, that's what spirals down into depression, anxiety, frustration. So I think as I work with people with very high IQs, I just flag that and say, okay, you sound very bright to me and intelligent. I don't give anyone tests or anything, but I can hear their fast processing. And if they don't give their brain and their mind a break, they actually really fatigue themselves. Mm-hmm. So for everyone's maybe 10 thoughts, they have 100. Well, think about what that does to you day after day after day. And then you throw in some caffeine in there and your 100 goes up to maybe 200. And it's awesome when you're on. Right. And when your thoughts are on and on point. But when it starts getting off, then you can derail pretty quick too. So I tell people that's the shadow side you want to be aware of. But the good news is you can get right back on track again if you're aware of that. So seeing little flags like, for me, it's fatigue. Like I'll feel fatigue. My body will start telling me I'm tired through headaches or through aches or just low blood sugar. I just have to pay attention to little flags, irritation. If I'm easily irritated at someone, I had to send an email this week because I was on a call with 2 other people and all 3 of us were talking. I was listening and all of a sudden I just got this irritation where I realized, I probably did more of a reaction than a response. So I had to kind of circle around saying, yeah, sorry about that. So I think you're just aware of that and you're able to course correct quicker.
Mm-hmm. You referenced EQ, SQ. What is all of that? For those of us who are not coaches, can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll give you the nutshell. IQ, I think we all know it's intelligence quotient, and it's something that we've tested in our school systems, and it's kind of on logic and critical thinking. It's typically something you're born with and you can't really tweak it a lot. EQ is our emotional quotient. That's how we respond to life with our emotions and our resiliency to be able to interact with a crisis and humanity and just all the emotions that we carry inside us and how to get it outside in a constructive manner. That's connected to EQ. And then SQ is a newer research, and it's called spiritual quotient, spiritual intelligence. And this isn't having anything to do with religious connections, but it's really more of this existential awareness or intelligence that makes it very sensitive, aware of humanity, the plight of humanity. When I was teaching, I knew that there was something like this out there because I still remember teaching on the Bosnian War. That would date me. but it was little fourth graders, and one child was in the back corner just starting to cry. She was getting in touch with the genocide that was happening over there. And that's when I realized I had to stop and recognize that we were talking about facts, but her spiritual intelligence was making the connection that there was a massive humanity need that was being broken, and she was feeling the whole thing of it. That's someone with a high SQ. The other thing we're seeing that with is highly sensitive people. That's another conversation that's happening that's usually connected to high SQ and high EQ.
Well, I think we need a whole other podcast on that, because now I have a million questions. You and I are always like brainstorming ideas. Okay, so that one I'm writing down because I have so many questions.
Perfect.
Amazing.
I've got some handouts too. We can get on the website. The good news I tell people is SQ and EQ can be raised. And this moves us into this idea of your powerful life. We talk about the shadow side of our strengths. We're really talking about how do we connect with our EQ and our SQ.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
That's amazing. Okay, I wrote that down. So stay tuned for the Heather Penny podcast coming soon to a channel near you. No, I've never heard of the SQ or the EQ. Of course, I've heard of the IQ, but I haven't heard of these other two. So,
yeah. Maybe we'll do a podcast on each one separately. Okay. There's some crossover clearly, but that SQ is a newer research, and it's been one of my most fascinating, probably research topics that I've had over the last, I want to say 10, 15 years.
Okay, so we'll get back to our topic at hand, and I want to get a little personal and talk about what it looks like in our lives, because I'm sure if we have our strengths and then we have our shadows, I'm sure other people who are listening are also battling it. So my strength is being very creative and very cerebral, and you're talking about the person who has 100 ideas, and then you mix that with my sugar addiction and my caffeine addiction, and I am like the Tasmanian devil spinning.
Yes.
So I love to write and I love researching new topics. But my shadow side to this is that I have a really hard time connecting with other people because I stick so much into my head, and I have such a high standard for myself. I have a hard time connecting with people because I judge them. Okay, that's my confession moment. So, like, would that be considered a shadow, you think, or no? Am I off point?
And that's probably the self-awareness that we're hearing too, which is, first of all, I applaud you, the fact that you can recognize that. And then in order to not stay stuck in the shadow, you get to explore what you truly need in friendship. So for instance, I have a high IQ, EQ, SQ, and I've worked on all of those to really make sure that I'm operating in those, and I hire people to support me in that growth of that. But I think as I look at those, and when they work against me, I'm realizing, oh, okay, I am not honoring how I'm kind of wired to step into friendships and to conversations and even my business. So I think as you get to honor that piece, you kind of just take a beat, step back and say, what do I need for a professional relationship right now? What do I need for a personal relationship? And just stopping long enough to put your all your intellect toward that allows you to honor what you really need. So part of the judgment and the frustration you might be feeling with other people is really you signaling to yourself, yeah, this isn't really fulfilling.
Okay.
So here's a personal example. I realized this when I was getting irritated with a lot of group work. I needed more one-on-one work. That's what changed my whole company. My whole business model turned into one-on-one work. I still do group work, but I let the one-on-one and the individual work drive how I step into a company, or how I do a retreat, or how I do any workshops. It usually starts with the individual connection with a leader in the company, or a leader in the organization, or just even a one-on-one person who wants to step into their own life with some kind of life coaching.
That makes so much sense. It makes me think of when we're in high school and we're trying to decide, okay, what college do I want to go to and what major? And we kind of go towards what we love, but we don't think about how we're wired. Like, I was a teacher for 4 years and I don't like people. So what was I thinking, being in a classroom with like 120 students plus having calls with their parents every day? Like, that wasn't me at all. So, I mean, learning how we're wired is so important, and yet we tend to neglect that.
Right. Yeah. And you probably, I know you're joking about that comment of you don't like people because I know you well. We have a good friendship, but I
Yeah,
think that
I
what you're
like you.
yeah, I made the list. You're probably just getting in touch more of what you like and how many people you can handle in a day, and what type of person you want to interact with. And
Mm,
I developed a similar journey working with kids and then realizing, wow, I can't do this every day. I have too much of an introvert and it was really exhausting to me. So I moved into university work and started working more with
mhm,
adults, and then had breaks, and then ended up opening my own company and doing more of that one-on-one. So it's a progressive journey. The
mm,
moment you start feeling that irritation or frustration or really that judgment, it's signaling to you, yeah, you get to find a different way, because
mm,
right now you're not giving yourself the permission to interact with the world and with people the way you want to. So when we don't do
mm.
that and we're mean to ourselves, so to speak, we're going to just start pointing our fingers out everywhere else. And I say those all my fingers pointing back because I've done the same thing. When I start getting a little too judgy, I go, oh, you're not happy and you're not owning your life and you're not happy. You're not owning and taking responsibility for how you are engaging with the world in your life, whether it's personal or professional.
Mhm,
Personal in my home, family, and friends, I have to be really aware of what I'm looking for. Do I want to do a 2-hour coffee date? Do I want to do a 2-hour walk? Do I want to just have a phone call? So you're constantly navigating that, and the judging is telling you that you're not happy with the way you're navigating your world. So you just kind of
mm,
stay curious with yourself and say, okay, I get to do this a better way. What do I really need?
mhm. That's such good advice. I will take that for sure. And another question I had is, how do we balance our strength with our shadow side? My daughter Eden, I keep thinking about her with this. She's almost 9 and she is the sweetest thing in the world. Like you're talking about the SQ, that's my Eden. She just is the most compassionate, tender-hearted little girl. And she's so sensitive. I have no idea where she gets that from at all.
Yeah.
So, how do I keep her heart loving and open, but she takes everything so personally? Like if I said, "Eating, you didn't clean up your room right." Oh, she cries and I just broke her little spirit. And
Yeah.
so being tenderhearted is positive, but it's also made her extremely sensitive. I'm the same exact way.
Mhm.
So, how do we balance that?
Well, I think you might want to look up the sensitive child.
Okay.
And I think there's more and more research that's come out of that really in the last decade. And it's
Mm,
typically connected to high IQ, high EQ, and high SQ. So that sensitivity is, they're very aware of the moment they've disappointed someone they love, and they're having a very hard time to internally course correct. So I think learning what she's experiencing and then having a language to the sensitive child is going to be really critical for
mhm.
your parenting. Probably should do another podcast on that, the sensitive child,
This
because I'm
sounds
working.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm writing that right now too.
I've coached a lot of parents on working with the sensitive child and how it's connected to high EQ and SQ.
Huh.
So typically, and even as an educator, I saw this, the sensitive child gets very shamed. And so because the child's sensitive, they go further inward and then
Mm,
they turn on themselves. So this is why then we're dealing with depression, anxiety, and frustration, at an exorbitant rate in our country. Even I'm seeing this as a really a kind of a social epidemic, where we're saying the sensitive person is really too hard to deal with. So let's just tell them to be quiet and pull it together, and
mhm,
let's be able to move on. The reality is that sensitive child has a very strong awareness and sensitivity to this world. And please hear me, I'm not saying we sit there and coddle them and sit and talk with them for
right.
hours, because that actually keeps them anxious. What we
Mm,
do is we help them understand themselves and we give them tools to self-soothe.
mm,
So, and that's a lot of how I coach parents, even like how they go to bed. It's a very different process. How to say goodnight to your brain, how to say goodnight to your heart, how to say goodnight to your body, and how to say goodnight to your spirit. It's a process. Once
mm,
the sensitive child understands that and can do that, they live with a very strong internal strength. But the
mm,
sensitive child typically overwhelms the parent or the teacher, the coach, or someone that's working with them, and they don't get the support they need. And then they grow up into a sensitive adult thinking they're the problem.
Yeah.
Reality is they're not the problem. They just had no one understanding them and helping them. Rather, it overwhelmed that parent or whoever was probably working with them. So they would rather say, your sensitivity is making me uncomfortable. You just need to either go to your room, or you need to be quiet, or you need to go do this worksheet. When in
Mm-hmm.
reality, they need something different to reach for. And it's not that hard. But once we understand that and we give that to them, they become a really powerful gift to our society.
Mm-hmm. And how do we identify our strength? And then how do we see where the shadow is? So everybody has different strengths. And then how do you identify I don't want to say symptoms, but I mean, would you
Yeah.
call them symptoms, that what the shadow is, what the struggle and the battle that
I
comes with
call
the
them
strength?
flags. I
Okay.
see a flag waving. I'll use myself as an example. I'm a strong high achiever. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, if anyone knows what that is. I love results. I love to have goals and get goals. I'm the type that even after I've done something, I will write it down on my list and check it off just so I can see how many things I checked off. Okay, so everybody gets this little personality that I have, and the style in which I step into my world and my life really requires, I want to enjoy that piece of me, but it requires me to be aware that that unchecked has the capabilities of running over people.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to hold my strengths and keep them what I call working toward the light, which means I get to achieve, but I have to put boundaries on myself, because I will always, if I achieve 20 things today, I'll want to achieve 25 tomorrow and then 30 the next day.
Yeah.
So that you can see is the shadow side of me. Part of what I have to do sometimes say, you achieve 20 things today, well done. Tomorrow, you're going to achieve 10.
Hmm.
The next day, you're going to take a day off.
Wow.
So that's then how I have to talk to myself so that my achiever side doesn't run away with me. And when I work with people, and again, I work with a lot of highly successful high achievers, it's a running joke now. We call it, it's like, let's give our achiever a coffee break. So your
Mm-hmm.
achiever kind of needs a coffee break. And then I have a relator strength inside of me too, that I love relating to people. Once I tell myself, hey, just lean back, stop trying to achieve, and really focus on the person in front of you and staying fully
Mm-hmm.
present, I fully enjoy that. It's almost like I put my achiever on the task of relating to someone. So then I think there's this awareness that you hold. So once you have that awareness, you kind of look for the flags. That being said, I want to let everybody off the hook and say, this is why we hire professionals, because we often don't see it ourselves,
Yeah.
myself included. I hire people all the time to tell me certain truths and raise my self-awareness so I can be a better presence in this world.
I'm glad you said that, because I was also thinking about, like, when does achieving and having everything in order step over into like OCD, or when do you know that you're hitting the danger zone, because we're such high achievers, and it can be really easy to be super judgmental on ourselves and be hard on ourselves and then spiral into depression, like what we were talking about with Robin Williams and Anthony Bourdain. So where do we look for the danger zone, and when we've crossed over too far?
Well, for me, again, and this is what I coach people in, is just how to see the flags. For me, it's irritation.
Mm-hmm.
This is pretty typical across the board. When you're finding that you're irritated because your husband's chewing his cereal too loud, that you have to own that and say, wow, something way too little is setting me off.
Mm-hmm.
So when something like that is happening, I have to stop and pause and say, what are you really frustrated about? What is it that you're feeling like you have not gotten control of? And typically, I'll admit, it's stuff I can't control. I just care very deeply and I want to try and control it. And I usually have to release it and say, I cannot control this issue. It makes me sad as I see this person uncomfortable, but it's not mine to own. So I have to stop and reset that. And then I can sit there and happily listen to my husband crunch his cereal, because that's never really the issue. It's just, those are usually those little irritations that start getting under your skin, is telling you something else is really going on.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is when you turn to something like what I call false comforts and false addictions, or false,
Mm-hmm.
self-soothing things,
Yeah.
food, overbuying, staying busy, staying productive. These are all subtle addictive things that we turn to because we really don't want to turn to ourselves and say, what is it you really need today? What is it that I can offer you to comfort yourself besides that third brownie, you know, and learning how to say, you know, I just need a nap, or I need to take a walk, or I need to call a heart friend that can give me comfort I need because I'm facing something challenging. This is, these are things that kind of get in the way. And I think when I notice that I'm turning to false comforts, for me, it's food,
Me
you know,
too.
and busyness, you know,
Me
and
too.
overbuying. I guess all of them, those are for me. I think I have addictive tendencies, but I think that people who are high achievers have these addictive tendencies because they want to achieve more and more and more. So they'll do whatever they can to keep themselves in motion. It's kind of their personal high. So I think once you know this about your personality, you just check it. You know, when I put things in my mouth, I'm like, wow, do I really need this right now? Am I truly hungry? Or am I reaching for something that isn't good for my body and it's not the fuel it needs? It's just going to make me feel good for all of 25 seconds.
Mm-hmm. When I talk to you, I realize I've been in this cycle without knowing that I've been in this cycle for 45 years. You bring up so many things, and I have all these. I get it now. Now I get why I'm feeling this way. So
Yeah.
thank you. And you bring up these topics that I've never even thought to think about. Like I never thought about the shadow side. And then when we started brainstorming ideas and I'm really pondering this, I realized that for much of my life, I've been so scared of being in the shadow and addressing the shadow that I forfeited the success that could have come with it. Like I've always wanted to write a book or a screenplay, but I just knew it would get rejected. So, and I'm so sensitive that I'm scared someone wouldn't like what I consider my greatest strength or gift. So, how do we believe that our success is worth the risk into the shadows and our greatest fear facing that?
Wow. That's really good, Christina. First of all, the first thing you do is you admit it. So you bring it into the light. How many of us hold these secrets around with them their whole life and they take it to the grave?
Yeah.
They always wanted to write a book and they never did it because they never think it would go. So I would say the first thing you do is you bring it into the light and recognize I'm scared.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing you do, I think, is really just own the vulnerability of that and just starting to develop the beliefs around it. You know, what are some of the beliefs? When I was starting my coaching company, I was terrified, 10 years ago. Will anyone want to hire me? I'm leaving a secure field in academia and moving out into the universe to say, pick me. I'm a coach, pick me. And what I had to really do is reach for some beliefs that would ground me. And things like, I'm made to do this, or the clients will come, or I get to live in abundance, not fear. You're reaching for some of these beliefs and grounding yourself in it. And you invite other people into it. When you're trying to do something big in your life, there are people that will join your false beliefs and go, oh yeah, Heather, you shouldn't step out. You're really risking something for your family. And I'm not saying that there's not wisdom in that. Sometimes you want to hear that, but something in your deep down in your gut, you're made for more and you want more and you want to step out and you want someone to just support that faith with you. That's a critical crossroad in your life. So I think as you do that, who you have around you is critical. And, I chose some wise sojourners with me that said, Heather, I think you really can do this. And we're going to support you in it. And we'll be your cheerleader in it. And I still had to do the work and create the business and everything else. But standing in that with people that believed with me was what I was looking for. And when I failed, not if, but when I failed, they weren't going to sit there and go, I told you shouldn't never do this. They just said, okay, how do what are you doing to pick yourself up? How do you want to move forward? What are you learning from this? There was no shame attached to me stepping out and taking a risk. There was more of this, we applaud risks, and the failures are only an opportunity to learn from it and rise stronger.
Makes me think of the podcast we did just 1 or 2 episodes ago, The World Needs Who You Are Meant to Be.
Yeah.
And so if we don't step out, I'm just thinking of the gift that you are to me and to the other clients that you coach. You've helped us so much. And so if you were too scared to step out, we would be missing huge healing and a huge gift. So I'm so glad you did. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I don't feel like I'm that much far ahead out of anyone. I just feel like I'm daring to step out and blazing some sort of a trail, at least for me. If it helps anyone, I'm happy to do that. But everything I talk about is because I've had to live it and I've experienced what it feels like to be terrified to take a leap and to fail and to succeed and to be really proud of yourself that you took that leap. So even as a parent, I'm parenting two young adults now. Part of what we celebrate is not necessarily success, even though, of course, we'll celebrate the success. We really put a high emphasis on intelligent risk taking.
Hmm.
So what if you didn't make the team? So what if you failed on this? Did you risk? That's what we're going to go out and take you out to dinner for. That's what we'd buy something special for you. You took a risk.
Mm-hmm.
Outcome is irrelevant to us as parents. We're just so proud of you for taking a risk. And then we celebrate that risk taking versus, oh, you took a risk and succeeded. Okay, now we'll reward you. That's not what I want my kids to feel rewarded for. I want them to feel rewarded for the fact that they ventured to step out. And the other thing too is that's how I want them to see other people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they watch someone, fall flat in their face. And I go, wait a minute, did they just risk and take a step out? We're going to stand with them emotionally. We're going to say, well done in our head. We are not going to shame them or mock them or point at them. Even if they fell flat on their face, the fact they took a risk, man, they have my respect and my admiration. That's a different paradigm shift, particularly for young adults. It's like this, we only celebrate someone or respect someone if they've succeeded.
Mm-hmm. It's cool because it makes me think that you're celebrating the person for who they are and not what they do. You are brave, you are strong, you are courageous,
Yeah,
versus you're a winner, you've accomplished it, you've beat somebody else. It's like who you are versus what you have and what you can do.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Great distinction.
And you're, like we've been saying this the whole time, a parent, you're an executive coach, mentor. How do we help others in our world acknowledge their strengths and prepare them to battle the shadows that come with it? So, as an executive leader leading the staff or as a parent leading your children, how do you build their strengths and prepare them for the battle of the shadow?
Well, I think we have to model it. I think in my best days, I model my risk taking. I model the fears that I feel and the courage and the confidence and clarity I have to reach for. In my not so good days, man, I just like to feel like I got it all together and there's nothing wrong with me. And look at me go. And that's my ego screaming to the world. I'm important. I'm valued. What I try and be very conscious of is I don't want people to have that as their takeaway in their work with me. I want them to have their takeaway with, wow, I got to find my clarity. I got to find my confidence and I got to find my courage to launch out to this world. And I got a context for how to engage with failure and learn from it and stay curious about what my next steps are versus staying focused on the shame of failure. So I think if we can model that, it's a vulnerable thing to model at times. And sometimes I can feel the pain of that, the uncomfortableness of it. If a whole company's looking at me and I've quote failed, I do not want to admit that I have failed.
Right.
I want to act like I haven't. And at the same hand, I think how we step into that uncomfortable space and acknowledge it to ourselves is one conversation. And how we do it in a safe space with people around me that love me is another conversation. And then how I offer it back professionally is a third conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not all the same conversations.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation I have that I whisper to my husband that I feel really stupid and embarrassed is not the same conversation I have with the company. It's a different level. And I think that's some of the mistakes we make too when we're trying to embrace kind of our comfortableness or the pain of growth. We launch out and it just backfires so badly. And I think I just want to help honor people saying, oh, I get it. I so get it. Now let's separate out how you need to deal with the uncomfortableness of your growth and how many, who do you need on your team around you? Who is on your team around you? Is it a spouse, a friend, a counselor, coach, boss, a sister, mother? Who is it that's in your corner and kind of around you? And how many people do you really need in order to take these big risks?
That's great advice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all the time we have for today. Join us next week when we talk about enthusiasm is contagious. Please subscribe to the Heather Penny podcast. And for questions, comments, and resources, visit heatherpenny.com. And I also want to thank all of our listeners. We've reached over 1,100 downloads in over
Yay!
20 countries, which is fabulous. It's so exciting. So
Oh,
thank you, Heather, for giving us the content. And thank you, each person, for dedicating part of your day or your week to listening to Heather and me. So thank you. We so appreciate it. And tell your friends, share it on social, and give us a great review on whatever podcast platform you're listening from. Remember to live your best life. You have to live intentionally. Have a great day, and we can't wait for you to join us next week. Thank you, Heather.
you're welcome. Take care, everyone.